After almost 5 years on the road, I have had a lot of run-ins with windstorms. I had a pop-up camper that I pulled with my little Honda CRV that collapsed in a windstorm in South Dakota. I do have a lot of things that I have learned since that incident a few years ago that I now carry with me when I am camping in places with high wind, especially like we see in the desert around this time of the year. And I wanted to share a few tips with you guys that I have learned and picked up over the years that make camping in windstorms a little safer, a little bit more enjoyable, and a lot less scary and stressful. I hope these beginner tips will help ease your mind when you are first camping in windstorms. A lot of the time there are windstorms, especially in places that get them a lot, like down in the desert or in the Southwest, that do forecast those conditions so you can prepare a little bit ahead of time. Your regular weather app on your iPhone now does track wind direction and speed. The direction is just as important to note as the speed. I prefer apps like Windy. I have talked about Windy ever since I had that pop-up camper incident. It is one of my favorite apps because not only does it give you the wind speed, the direction, it also forecasts it for the future. I think it was originally created for people who do a lot of wind sports like windsurfing to kind of be able to track how that wind will affect them. You can see the wind patterns throughout the entire country, and they have expanded the app a ton. You can also see live weather radar, so if you're dealing with wind and rain or snow or something else, as well as wildfires, it does track those a little bit. It's not the best app for those, but I'll cover that in a different video. Windy is one of my go-to apps. As long as you have your settings correct, you can see it in miles per hour, you can see the gusts that you can expect, you can see the changing direction throughout the day, and it can keep you better informed about what is coming next. Part of this preparation is to know how and where to park when you are camping, when you're expecting a windstorm. Places like the desert, there aren't a lot of sheltered places you can go, but it is advisable obviously always to park away from trees with limbs that could potentially fall, away from other campers that might have debris that could be flying at your car. Parking away from the edge, like in wall, the wind speeds can become unpredictable on the edge of a ridge line or something like that, and can actually become much stronger, and you don't want to accidentally lose some of your items off of the edge of a ridge line. There have been incidents in the past where obviously underweighted trailers can tip over in high winds. Trailers, like travel trailers and such, are not rated for as high winds as, say, a vehicle. They are bigger and boxier and do have that surface area for the wind to press on, and the last thing you want obviously is that to happen. So that leads me to my next tip, is to park into the wind. This is where checking Windy is one of the more important parts, to also check the direction of the wind, so you can properly park your vehicle parking into the wind. Because if you think, if your car can withstand driving into 70, 80, up to 90 miles per hour while you are driving down the highway, it's going to sustain that wind a lot better if you are facing into the wind instead of it being a crosswind where you're going to be rocking and rolling all night long. Obviously, sometimes it's unavoidable to have a crosswind, especially though if you have a trailer or something. It is super important to try to park with your trailer facing into the wind, because again, it's very similar then to towing while you're driving down the road, and it gives you a little bit more leeway on that wind speed, and it makes things just a lot less dangerous. Another tip is to obviously bring in any items that you have outside. Securing everything loose when you know a strong windstorm is coming. There's currently one raging outside if you guys can't hear it. And bringing in those chairs, bringing in your rugs, making sure you have your table secure, your awnings pulled in. If you have an accessory tent like a clamshell or a screen tent or something like that, just take the time to take it down so you're not chasing it across the desert or over a ridge or through the prairie when it's getting shredded by the wind and getting carried off. Obviously, you don't want to be littering your own items that you've spent your hard-earned money on throughout the place that you're camping, and you don't want that to become a projectile for somebody else that is camping close by either. So being responsible and bringing those items in and storing them and making sure that they are secure is part of being prepared for the windstorm. Travel trailers specifically are rated for a lot less wind speed than, say, an ambulance or your car or something like that, because of just the way they are structured, and their weight isn't always distributed the way that you may want it to be in high winds. A lot of people want to prepare for storms by emptying their tanks and emptying out their water and thinking that that will help with the wind, but instead you actually need more weight to hold your trailer where it is. Make sure all your jacks are down and secure, your wheels are chalked, and that you either have sandbags if you're in an area where high winds happen very often, filling up your water tanks, making sure your gray and black tanks are full to add that extra weight to the bottom of your camper, to make sure that you are having the weight at the lowest point of your camper possible to keep it anchored to the ground. Again, if you're in a campsite or something, you really don't have a lot of choice of which direction you're pointed, so having that extra weight and having those jacks and stabilizers down really does help. The jury is kind of out whether you should reconnect your camper to your tow vehicle. A lot of people do, a lot of people don't. Anytime I have been unsure about the weather, I have always reconnected my travel trailer to my tow vehicle in case I do need to leave if the weather makes me uncomfortable. That brings us to the next point, is have an emergency plan. If this is something that you feel like is too much for you to handle and you are uncomfortable with the situation or you don't feel safe, have a plan to have everything packed up and ready to go at a moment's notice. The best part about traveling is that you can leave the situation. Now, if you have a high profile vehicle, like if you have a truck and truck camper, that is very high. Driving with a crosswind on the highway, especially passing semi trucks or things like that, can be more dangerous, but that doesn't mean you can't move to a different location and taking it really slow if you don't feel comfortable hunkering down where you are. I wouldn't advise long travel days on a high wind day, but you can move if you need to. Again, towing a trailer is much more dangerous in windy conditions. It is better to hunker down, but like I said, if that windstorm turns into rain and flooding or this or that, or you may have to evacuate because of a fire, it is advantageous to have things ready to go just in case. Another part of windstorms is just kind of waiting them out. So this next tip is to just have a backup plan of what you're doing all day when you know a storm is coming. Make sure you have your grocery shopping done before it happens. Make sure you have foods that you can eat with or without power. Make sure you have ventilation inside if you rely on, say, a propane stove to cook. Sometimes it is hard to keep roof vents open in windstorms because it can actually blow off those little flimsy roof vent covers. So make sure you have another plan for ventilation if you're going to be cooking inside. It's also, in very high wind conditions, much safer to stay inside. I know a lot of people like to be active and go outside. I can't say in this last windstorm I just experienced that I didn't get stir crazy and want to go on a long walk, but you do need to be careful because a lot of people don't secure their items as much as you would expect, and so you have to be worried about blowing debris, or if you are near sand or somewhere with trees where limbs could fall, you just need to be aware of the risks of going out, and I wouldn't make it part of the plan to go hang out all day. It's much safer to stay inside and just kind of hang out, have a hobby or a TV show to hold you over. Make sure all of your batteries are charged before the storm happens. If you rely on a generator, you do need to be cognizant of how you are turning that generator. If you're going to be running it in a windstorm, you obviously don't want that exhaust to be blowing straight into your car or your RV, but you also don't want it to be pointed the wrong way where a lot of dust and debris is getting into the generator while it is running outside during the windstorm. And finally, my last tip, after the windstorm is passed, go around and check to make sure you have tried to clean up everything that is probably blown out of your vehicle or your camp while the windstorm has happened. Even if you feel like you haven't made any impact, sometimes just opening and closing the door and little pieces of paper or trash have flown out of the doors when you've opened them because it just becomes a wind tunnel and just sucks everything out. Just make sure to try your best to leave no trace and to pick up anything that has blown around during the storm from your camp, or you could be a good person and try to clean up somebody else's that has maybe blown into your camp. Obviously, if you've suffered any damage during a storm, take pictures, get that assessed, make sure you track all of that and timestamp it in case you have to file a claim with insurance. But also, if you do have a damaged tent or awning or chairs that have blown in the wind, don't just leave them, especially when you're out on public land. Make sure to leave no trace, pack out anything that is damaged, and dispose of it properly instead of leaving it out in the desert or in the prairie for somebody else to deal with the next time they go camping. If you have other windstorm tips, please leave them below. This is something that I feel like a lot of people have been talking about in recent events, especially in Southern California right now, receiving a lot of high winds. And I feel like this is going to continue through the rest of the winter. It is the windy season. So if you have more tips that I didn't cover that maybe are a little more advanced or not so beginner, or maybe it's a beginner one that I missed, leave them below to brainstorm for other people so they can read through all your tips and tricks. I'm sure you guys have great ones, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye!